Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel. And thank you for joining this audio, no pictures live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the idea of have the modern philosophers or any philosophers, historians, observers, call them what you like, social commentators, have they added anything to the philosophical body of knowledge to do with human society and interaction? So the ancients, what work has survived? Remember the massive libraries of the era. You know, in the ancient times, the library at Alexandria, for example, all these libraries all went up in flames, or the place was invaded and goons burned the place down, that sort of thing. So vast amounts of literature from the ancient world were lost. And if we look at what survives, and whether it be a few stone tablets from thousands of years ago, or texts from scrolls from, say, Thucydides and ancient Athens, and the Roman era, of course. But if we look at the works of 2,000 years plus ago, if we look at the works of sort of Seneca and Cicero, and even the histories written by Julius Caesar, we look at Pliny, Suetonius, Tacitus. The list just goes on of historians, commentators, and those who were sometimes not necessarily at the time, but in years shortly after, were covering the history of the period or events that occurred, and giving their analysis and their reasoning, and also recording the speeches, say in the Roman Senate or the Athenian Assembly, and so on. We're recording the speeches and the reasoning and the rationale. Now, remember, public oratory was considered in terms of testing your ideas. So it was a marketplace of ideas that the ancient Greeks, or the Athenians in particular, and the Romans, of course, would say you go out and make a speech and argue your case. And if it had merit, it would then grow legs and carry on. If not, then it went nowhere. And if you look at the reasoning methods of the Senecas and the Ciceros, the Seneca letters of a Stoic, that sort of thing, and you look at those sorts of things, or again, Tacitus and the like, Suetonius, Suetonius less so. His impartiality is in question, I would argue, but you look at many of the others, and you can see the type of reasoning, the type of rationale, the way they think through complicated issues, how they arrive at conclusions, how they determine what's just and reasonable, what is not, these sorts of things. And you can see those comments, whether it be Thucydides talking about the Peloponnesian War, so 2,500 years ago, or Seneca, say, Cicero, 2,000 years ago, or even the stone tablets that are dug up from places like ports like Basra and so on in the in the ancient Arabic world, and even surviving Egyptian texts and so on. You see that nothing's really changed. 4,000 years ago, a woman is complaining to her husband that a neighbour is boasting that she's had their house remodeled and had an extension put onto it, and they've got new furniture, and she's annoyed that this woman is boasting in the marketplace about how fantastic her new house is, or remodeled house is, and so she's pestering her husband to pay for the remodeling of her place, because she wants to shut that woman up, because it's insufferable to have to put up with her boasting and so on in the marketplace. Now, that's 4,000 years ago. Exactly the same conversations, and I've seen them and heard them occur today in the world. So in that sense, the sort of concerns that a woman from 4,000 years ago has about remodeling their house and the boasting of a neighbour and that sort of thing, that's exactly the same as you hear today. And people will the folks down the road buy that new car and start talking about how great it is, and so you want to have a new car as well, just to shut them up and to stick it up and show that you can play in their league. These sort of, so exactly the same. So 4,000 years have passed of human existence and development, but have we actually developed? Have we actually come anywhere at all? And again, if you look at Homer and the Iliad, all that sort of stuff, and talking about the gods, the Greek gods, and they had great power but human shortcomings. You look at those, and they talk about humans' behaviors, attitudes, views, jealousies, petty jealousies, spites, hatreds, vengeance, this, that, and the next thing. And it's exactly the same as people behave today. If you look at the speeches in the Roman Senate, and some of which have survived, then they too indicate attitudes, views to analysing problems and talking about dealing with things that would be the same today. If you just took out the place names and the references to the horse and cart, or the technology of the day, if you took those out, it could be a speech that was made 5 minutes ago in the West today, or anywhere today. So really, human reasoning and attitudes and views and the pettiness of human existence, that hasn't changed over 4,000 years. And I would argue, if you went back to the early Egyptian societies, 7,000 years ago, earlier, you would have the same, you would see the same sort of thing. So now, again, the limit to this is the amount of ancient literature that has been lost. So a tiny fraction of what was written. Again, I refer to the library at Alexandria in Egypt. The library there from 2,200, 2,300 years ago or thereabouts, one of the biggest collections of the ancient works and writings from the philosophers of the day, and these works have mostly been lost. So if we had that, we'd have a broader body of work to reference. But from the work that did survive, then we can assume that the philosophers of the modern era, and I'm talking about the Rousseaus or the Descartes or the Locke's or John Locke, Edmund Burke, all of these people that are held up today as being, John Locke in particular, held up today as having something cogent to say, then and something worthwhile to say, if not groundbreaking, that they're then actually not coming up with anything new, because the human existence has stayed so constant and so unchanged over the centuries and the thousands of years that I would suspect, and I would assert in all probability, they're writing and talking about stuff that's already been talked about thousands of years ago. Now, if human existence had changed drastically or substantially or even somewhat, then you could say, well, they're talking about completely different human beings, attitudes, views, methods of reasoning, ways of sorting things out, methods of negotiation, about treaties and trade and but they're not. I would say it's the same. So I would argue that whatever was literature survived still applies 100% today, and therefore I would suggest that all the writings that we see, again, the Rousseaus and so on, that was written about before it was just lost. So are we adding anything new? Given the human condition has not changed, then what is there new to say? Are we brighter than they used to be then? But there have been changes, of course. So there have been changes in, well, science is an obvious area, technology. So the technology, imagine trying to explain to someone in ancient Athens 2,500 years ago about mobile phones or about spaceships or something. They just couldn't even take it in. So yet if you went to, say, a Leonardo da Vinci or in the embracing of the scientific era, particularly as is represented in, say, the Italian city-states of the time, if you were to talk about submarines and aircraft and these sorts of things, they probably could comprehend it once that the scientific age had Enlightenment, as it's sometimes called, the insight. Once that scientific age had begun, they probably could comprehend that. So that's a bracketed off area of time where people from 500 years ago, I'm not sure they could comprehend everything. Nanotechnology is probably a bit of a struggle, but they could comprehend a lot of what we use today as being at least comprehensible, if not realizable, all that time ago. So really, what body of knowledge are we adding? I don't think we're really adding anything. I think the human condition has been so unchanging over thousands of years that other than scientific changes, then there is no or the human relationship to the technology, that obviously has changed. And so we can say, someone like Isaac Newton represented the changing relationship between humans and technology. That can be captured. Also other writers, whereas Rousseau sort of talks about the human condition. Now even Marx and Marxism, Marx based his whole thesis, if you will, and particularly say you look at not simply the Communist Manifesto, but particularly the more economic bent around Das Kapital, which was, some would argue, is really his seminal work that was finished by his colleague Engels. And that was a relationship between the modern, or what was then the modern industrial economy of the Industrial Revolution. And remember, Marx was sort of viewing it really in sort of the early to early intermediate part, where there was mass movement of people from the country to the cities. Slums were being thrown up to quickly accommodate them, and working in certainly unsafe factory conditions, and with just casual labour and being, certainly by today's standards, horribly mistreated. But Marx was commenting on that the social relationship to industrial technology. And so that, again, was very much a product of his times. If you look at how he represents the aspirations and imagined or suspected goals of people. Remember, Marx started from his determination and then worked backwards rather than finding the facts to support a thesis. He began with the conclusion and worked backwards. So he only used information that would support the outcome that he'd predetermined, which is a very Marxian way of analysing anything. So Marx really was talking about the technology and the social relationship to technology, which of course would change as technology changed. But again, outside of that, has understanding, commentary of the human condition changed? I would argue no, and I don't think there's anything new being added, because people haven't changed. They're the same thousands of years ago as they are today, technology notwithstanding. Now coming to the area of what then therefore is social progress. And if we look at that outside of simply the technological thing, for example, medical technology has meant lives, we live longer, for example. Industrial technology has added a layer of productivity to Western society that means we have a level of material abundance that was hitherto unimaginable due to that industrial productivity. But again, that's the changing relationship of humans to technology. Now the issue of what therefore would represent a society that is advancing. Well, it's behaviours and it's agreed behaviours. So the society is able to get together and agree on, through parliament or a political process or organisational processes, some sort of able to advance society, and advancement would come through achieving greater levels of consensus without having to kill people who disagree with you, by the way. I mean, we're not globalists after all. So the idea of, say, fully independent courts, incorruptible courts. Now, the Romans dealt with this. So the Romans, a number of Roman commentators, the Ciceros as an example, were outraged that people would try and corrupt a Roman court. The Romans, or certainly in Cicero's perspective at least, believed that impartial, independent, incorruptible justice, judges that couldn't be bribed or corrupted, and these sorts of things, that this was a sign of an advanced, sophisticated society. And if you couldn't achieve that, then it was a sign that society was either going backwards or was failing to meet its obligations. And this is the elite government, the Senate in this case, to meet its obligations to the citizenry to provide a framework of law of which all could be completely confident that its impartiality and its just nature. So achieving that, and notice how much backsliding there is at the moment in the West. The globalists are forcing the whole legal infrastructure to be nothing more than a plaything, a corrupted plaything for their use to crush their opposition, to push through the things they want to do to create legal precedents they intend to use. So the idea of corrupting judges and prosecutors and so on is just standard practice for the globalists. I mean, why would you do it any other way? But to my mind, that is a backsliding and going backwards to the Dark Ages, where every judge and local official was some petty bullshit corrupted tyrant, and I think we're going back to there now. So that the signs of a sophisticated society is incorruptible politicians representing the people, laws of which all are to be treated equally, incorruptible courts. Now we'd add other things like that. Should there be support for people who can't take care of themselves, like for example, the aged or the infirm, that type of thing. Well, sure, that's also a sign, I think, of an advanced society. But the ability to deal with problems without ideological perversion or subversion is also, the methods of reasoning that the Romans were employing, even the ancient Athenians, for that matter. Remember, the Persian Empire was huge back in the day. It had a massive bureaucracy and administered the Persian Empire quite effectively for long periods of time. So all these things have gone on in the past, and the way we advance as a society is through various types and forms of consensus and agreement, but also by reasoned argument and persuasion. Now, this is where the globalists are going. They're not trying to argue their case at all. I mean, all they do is tell lies and accuse us of being Nazis if we question their lies. So I would argue we're actually going backwards, and we're becoming a much less sophisticated society as a consequence. And I don't think it's possible to add new knowledge to the human condition, given that humans have been so unchanged over the many thousands of years. But what we can do is ensure we have a better society, and things like independent courts and incorruptible officials are very much a part of that. And I think we achieved, to a large extent in the West, we achieved that really, following World War II. But it's gone backwards, and I think we're going backwards at a very fast rate, and going back to times when corruption of officials was standard. And I think we're heading there at high speed. You've been a Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.